Colorado families, this week on Community Chat, Hagen Nares PLC, truck wreck and brain injury lawyers, is speaking with attorney Allison Boschert, owner of Boschert Law LLC. Allison specializes in divorces and child custody and support, spousal maintenance and division of property, and post-degree modification and protective orders. She's an advocate of families above all else. She also is known for offering something called bite-sized divorces, and I'm going to let her talk a little bit about that later. She is here to tell us about her journey. What is it like to be a client of hers, and a trading tidbit for the community? Welcome, Allison. We're so excited to have you today.
Thanks, Caitlin. I'm grateful to be here.
Well, I've known you for a while, and I've known about the growth of your firm, which is you are just an advocate for families above all else. And you really specialize in education, educating people on what it's like to have this process from start to finish. And it's built into the way that you represent people in your law firm. And so I would really always like to start in asking about the journey. How did it even come about that you decided to start the Boschert Law LLC and even go into family law?
Well, to be honest, for most of my childhood, I didn't even consider being a lawyer. That didn't really become a consideration until after college, because my major in college was history, and I was on track to become a professor, to continue in higher education in history. And at some point, I had a revelation that that's not what I wanted to do anymore. And I was lucky to be acquainted with people in my life at the time that connected me with, I still wanted to be a teacher, and I got drawn into the Montessori world and became a certified Montessori educator for several years before realizing that unfortunately it wasn't going to support me financially. And then, I was just kind of figuring out, well, what is it that I'm interested in? And I drew upon everything that connected me with my values and my experiences and where I wanted to go. And the recurring themes were just, I enjoyed helping people become self-sufficient and feeling empowered, and finding solutions to problems in their lives. And being a lawyer seemed like a good fit for that. And because of my background in Montessori, as well as insurance, which I worked in right before law school, I felt like family law was a good fit right from the beginning. When I entered law school, I began law school certain that I wanted to work in family law. I was so certain I wanted to work in family law that I also started what was a juvenile and family law certificate in addition to my JD. So that basically had me completing more coursework credit-wise and in certain areas than would otherwise be required just for my JD. Because I wanted that background and expertise to get everything that I could out of law school for my career that I knew was coming in family law. And I had the privilege of being able to work in several different firms for the first 5 or 6 years of my career. And I learned, much like the dating world, you learn a lot about what you do and you don't want to do as far as how you practice law. And for me, there were several things that were really hard for me to swallow as an attorney, is particularly working in family law. One was seeing how destructive it could be to families financially, as far as the legal cost, and the fallout of what a property division does to a family. Seeing how a lot of the traditional ways that legal services are billed for, I feel like are put the client at odds with their attorney. It creates a conflict of interest, particularly in regard to billable hour requirements. And it just wasn't I wasn't in settings where people were being presented with any options for when they couldn't afford the full representation that most people think of when they have a lawyer helping them in their custody or their divorce case. So I began building an idea in my head about forming my own practice. I formed my own practice in January of 2020, which I initially thought was terrible when COVID started, but then it really was a blessing that those two things occurred at the same time, because it really forced not only myself, but also the clients I was trying to reach to adapt to this new world in a way that allowed even more cost-saving options. So in the first few years, I've always offered all levels of legal representation, from individual items all the way up to full representation. And I was always toying with the idea of creating a price menu for people to know what their cost would be up front. Because if there's one question I get more often than anything else, it's how much is this going to cost? And there's no answer to that under the traditional billing models, right? So I kept wanting to create a price menu, but not knowing how to do it because they don't exist. I've only found a handful of other attorneys, some in family law, some in other areas, that not only have a list of what their fees are, but that they post them publicly. So I had to draw upon this very small pool of information and mentors, and it took longer than I would have hoped. But I'm happy to announce that in the last month or so, I have finally launched my bite-sized divorce menu. And what it is it still offers all that range of legal representation, where people can choose something as small as help with review or drafting a single document, all the way up to something as large as me handling all aspects of their case in a full representation model. But over the years, I would say what's become the most popular, both in terms of what's being requested and what I enjoy practicing the most, is working in that unbundled setting where the client is in control of where they need help in their case. Because not only is that helping them control the budget of their case to preserve their finances for their next phase of their life, but it's also helping them, I think, emotionally and psychologically control how much they want it to let this case take from them and how much they want to give to it. And that's where I thrive, when I am practicing in a way where I feel like my values are being met and where I'm not actively causing harm to other people in the process. I'm happy and content, and hopefully my clients are deriving value from that.
Oh, I think that's fantastic. And you are unique in offering these unbundled services. Like you said, there's very few people that are doing it, if anything, that you've seen. And it allows people to just get a bits and pieces of what this is like. And if they really come to know you and understand what it's like to be a client of yours, then they can choose for further representation. Which leads me to my next question. What was it like to be a client of yours? Talk to me about how you stand out in the family law.
There's a lot of great lawyers in the family law community, Caitlin, but there's also, unfortunately, a large degree of lawyers who do a lot of things that I don't do. One of my biggest pet peeves is attorneys who are not honest, or who are in the habit of just telling their clients what they want to hear. And I don't do that. I'm very forthcoming with my clients, and I think, and I've received feedback that indicates that they greatly respect that, because that's really what you need. In divorce and custody cases, everyone's emotions are sky high. You don't know what the future looks like. The court has a lot of discretion if the court is the one having to make the decisions in your case. There's so many unknowns. And I think the biggest value that I can offer my clients is that they know that when they talk with me, they're going to get an honest answer. I'm going to be straightforward with them, and I'm going to be as flexible as I can be in meeting their needs in a way, on the financial side, where they're still receiving the help that they need and they want, while not, having to financially destroy their family to do so.
I think that's fantastic. And as a last training tidbit, I would love if you could just give a general overview to the general person of what the stages are in a typical family law case. And you could choose any, for example, you could say a divorce or a family custody battle, but what are the typical stages, just so anybody just off the street could learn a little bit more that they didn't know before listening to this podcast?
Yeah, so the stages in a custody and a divorce case are actually pretty similar to each other. The initial case, it opens with the petition being filed. That can be filed by one party or maybe by both parties together. I love it when parties can start the case together. I think that sets the case off on a totally different footing right from the beginning, if that's possible. In both types of cases, you'll have what's called an initial status conference with the court. By that, that's typically about 42 days after the case is filed. And this, of course, assumes that the other party has been served with the paperwork. And at that stage, the court expects the parties to have their financial disclosures done. The financial disclosures are what are utilized by the parties in the court to determine all the financial aspects of the case, from spousal maintenance, child support, division of property, which of course is only in a divorce case, things like that. You can request if there's a need for temporary orders. Temporary orders are generally requested at that initial status conference. It can address any of the issues that can be addressed in a permanent orders setting, but you get a much smaller amount of time with the court. So you kind of have to pick your heavy hitters, your most important issues. And then those temporary orders, if they're entered, are the orders that stay in place until permanent orders. In both custody and divorce cases, the courts do everything they can to encourage the parties to reach agreements on their own. And any good attorney should be doing that as well. I am a firm believer that trying to reach agreements on any issues, even if it's only some of them, even if it's only one of them, is much better than handing the issues over to the court, because even the most well-intentioned, well-educated judge is a stranger to you and your family. And you don't want a stranger making all of these big, scary decisions that are going to be impacting your life for, potentially decades to come. So you'll be ordered to attend mediation. Mediation is not parties' only opportunity to negotiate their case. In most cases are negotiating back and forth between the parties or their attorneys continuously from the beginning right up until the night before a hearing. And there's all different types of mediation styles available as well. And it's really one of the things I've enjoyed the most about being in family law for the last 10 years is seeing all the new emerging types of alternative dispute resolution that are coming out, the new method, the new innovations in how people are being billed for legal representation, different types of legal representation being offered. But yeah, so if they can settle whatever they can't settle amongst themselves, that goes to permanent orders for the court to hear. Permanent orders, sometimes you get your orders right at the end of the hearing. Sometimes it's taken under advisement and you get orders weeks or months later, which is another reason why it's great to try to settle as much as you can, so you're not waiting for these unknown orders to come down the tracks.
I think that's fantastic. It just is a phenomenal overview of start to finish that someone wouldn't even know if they hadn't gone through this. So I think that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Again, I know education is like your biggest thing, and you truly showed it here. If anybody wants to get in touch with you about a basic question, maybe talk to you about these bite-sized divorces or under any other type of service that you offer, what's the best way to reach you?
The easiest thing to do is to schedule a consultation for themselves. That is a link for my consultation calendar is on my website, BoschertLawLLC.com. Consultations can be done by telephone or Zoom, and I'm happy to address any questions people have in consultations, whether it's just walking through the process of the divorce, knowing what their options are, their questions about billing, anything. There's really not a question that I'm not willing to look at in any kind of consultation.
Fantastic. Well, I'll put your contact information in the link to schedule a consultation in the show notes. Thank you so much, Allison, for being on today.
All right. Thank you, Caitlin. It was a pleasure to be here.